ahead. Oh,
So you
and
can-
it's time to.
We were in the garage gym today and Kyra stood up and walked all the way across the went for it. It's over now.
Was that her first day walking?
Yeah, Ayla did her first day walking at Sun River Brewery when we were there visiting one time. So Kyra chose the gym and Ayla chose a bar. So that's a little bit
Cute.
about the babies.
Tyler, how are we looking quorum wise?
I think we just hit quorum.
Okay, great.
So Chair, I did want to just put out there that I think everyone's kind of joining at the same time. There's kind of a bit of a delay for people to show up on the screen. So we might have a few people join probably as we're calling roll, but just wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, it is 6 p.m. on May 13th, 2024. So I now call to order the Beaverton Urban Redevelopment Agency Budget Committee meeting. Recorder, would you please call the roll?
Bureau Budget Committee member Allison Tivnon. I'll come back to her. Bureau Budget Committee member Amy Webb. Bureau Budget Committee member Cassandra Olvin. I know she's absent, so I'll mark her. Bureau Budget Committee member Donaciano Mejia Hernandez. Bureau Budget Committee member Dylan Ballard. Bureau Budget Committee member Edward Kimmy. Here. Bureau Budget Committee member Eric Blair.
Here.
Bureau Budget Committee member John Duggar.
I'm here.
Bureau Budget Committee member, and I apologize if I'm saying this incorrectly, Kia Sundberg.
You had it right. I'm here.
Okay. Bureau Budget Committee member Kevin Teeter.
I'm here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Lacey Beatty.
Here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Mandeep Bawa. Bureau Budget Committee member Michael Hughes.
I'm here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Nadia Hassan.
Here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Oswaldo Bernal. Okay. Bureau Budget Committee member Rick Skyhun, and I apologize if I said that incorrectly.
I'm here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Rhonda Reister.
Here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Roy Kim.
I'm here.
Bureau Budget Committee member Sarah Walton. She's excused. And then our Bureau Chair, Ashley Hartmeyer Prigg.
Present. And I'm seeing Amy Webb and Oswaldo Bernal in the attendees now.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're good on quorum, Tyler? Okay, thank you.
I'm also here, Dave Zatmary.
Oh, hi, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so our next order of business is described in Agenda Bill 01-2024, which is to elect a Budget Committee Chair. In the interest of time, and given that this is our only Bureau Budget Committee meeting this year, I propose we do not elect a Vice Chair for one single meeting. If anyone objects, please indicate so by using the raise hand feature, or put your name in the chat so I can call on you. And if no one objects, we'll proceed to elect a Budget Committee Chair. Okay, in a moment, I will open the floor for any Budget Committee member to nominate themselves or another committee member to be Budget Committee Chair. The nominee may be any member of the Budget Committee. There is no need to second a nomination, but the person nominated may decline the nomination. You can nominate yourself, and if nominated, you can vote for yourself. Nominations will stay open until no one makes any further nominations. After I close the floor for nominations, we will vote by roll call on each person in the order the nominations were made. The first person who receives 12 or more votes, a majority of our Budget Committee, is elected to the position. And once we've chosen a chair, I will hand over the meeting to our new chair. So I will now open the floor for nominations for Budget Committee Chair.
Given no one jumping to the mic here, could you serve as the chair, Council Member Hartmeyer Prigg, since it's one meeting and technical and you clearly have the skills?
Oh, thank you. I decline the nomination. I will nominate Member Lair to be our chair tonight.
Second.
Oh, you don't have to second, but thank you, Edward. Eric, would you be willing to accept the nominations?
Yep.
Thank you. Hearing no further nominations, I'll close the floor for nominations for Budget Committee Chair. City Recorder, will you please conduct a roll call vote for the first, or for Eric?
Yes, Chair. Tibnon. Webb. Olvin. Floor. Satsmary.
Yes.
Mejia Hernandez. Ballard.
Yes.
Kimmy.
Yes.
Lair.
Yes.
Duggar.
Yes.
Sundberg.
Yes.
Teeter.
Yes.
Beatty.
Yes.
Bawa. Hughes.
Yes.
Hassan.
Yes.
Bernal.
Yes.
Skyhan.
Yes.
Reister.
Yes.
Kim.
Yes.
Walton. And our chair, Hartmeyer Prigg.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, motion carries. So I will now turn the meeting over to our Bureau Budget Committee Chair, Eric Lair.
Okay, and thank you, Chair Hartmeyer Prigg. So first, I will entertain motions to approve the May 22 or May 22nd, 2023 Bureau Budget Committee minutes.
I can
We
do
have-
that. I'll make a motion to approve the May 2022, 2023 minutes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilor Hassan, seconded by Chair Hartmeyer Prigg. Do we have any discussion? Okay. Hearing no discussion, Recorder, can we please do a roll call vote? And just as a reminder, if anybody was not at the meeting last year, we would ask that you abstain in this vote.
Yes, Chair, I'll call roll. Tibnon. Webb. Olvin. Floor. Satsmary.
Yes.
Mejia Hernandez. Ballard,
Yay. Yes.
Kimmy,
Yes.
Lair,
Yes.
Duggar,
Abstain.
Sundberg,
Yes.
Teeter,
Yes.
Beatty,
Yes.
Bawa, Hughes,
Yes.
Hassan,
Abstain.
Bernal,
Abstain.
Skyhen,
Abstain.
Reister,
Yes.
Kim,
Abstain.
Walton, and Hartmeyer Prigg.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is described in Agenda Bill 02-2024 regarding the consideration of the proposed Bureau budget for fiscal year 2024-25. We will start with the Bureau budget message brought to you by the Interim Bureau Executive Director, Dan Weinheimer, and the Bureau Treasurer, Debbie Lochner. Mr. Weinheimer and Ms. Lochner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair and Bureau Budget Committee. I've got some slides, or we have some slides, but while those are getting pulled up, I just want to introduce myself. My Zoom title is Assistant City Manager, and my interim status is fleeting, but I am currently the acting Community Development Director and the Interim Executive Director. We do have a replacement hired and coming next month for both those positions. And so I look forward to serving in this role for now, but hopefully be able to hand that off to a dedicated person here shortly. Just want to also thank Tyler Ryerson, Janine Lambert, and Kelly Perkins for specifically for help in crafting the agenda for today and kind of getting everything going. All the slides and all the background work that's been done to put the budget together. If I can get the next slide, please. So, for background for the Budget Committee, as you I'm sure know, the Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan was put into effect by action of the voters 2011 with very specific parameters from geographic standpoint. The plan defines the area boundaries. It speaks to maximum indebtedness. It speaks to goals and to allocation percentages. We kindly call buckets for funding when it comes to the budget. The funding for executing the projects, the work, the programs of the Urban Redevelopment Agency come from tax increment financing. And so essentially a frozen base and taxes on top of that frozen base that are accrued and provide funding. So next slide, please. Some of the goals that were adopted when the plan itself was adopted: arts and culture, business support, housing, engagement, transportation, redevelopment, and adding value. And so those have been guiding principles and things that we've worked on throughout the life of the plan to date, and we plan to throughout the rest of the life of the plan. So as we execute on the various projects and programs that are contemplated in the budget, that's sort of where we start and things that we're trying to fund. Next slide, please. So the buckets are these various goals. They're essentially the allocations for transportation and infrastructure. That's a primary function of redevelopment, essentially creating the roads, the utility infrastructure, and creating opportunity through purchase of land and things of that nature. That is the primary, the blue portion, the 48% of this circle. Joint investment is another. Debt service incentives for other programs and ways that we can put money into the area. And then community identity building is the last and smallest of the allocations. Next slide, please. So in looking at this is really what where we derive our funding, and starts at 2012, right after the plan was adopted. Essentially, the green is revenue that comes into the redevelopment agency and allows it to do work. It is a healthy curve or graph, I guess, and we are increasing our ability to do and put money into the redevelopment area. You can see it started with no green, and we've got an ample part of that bar, about 511 million in estimated property tax revenue for fiscal 2025. So next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of what we intend to do with said money. So want to talk a little bit about what we've done, and then we'll talk about what we would plan to do. And just a correction here on one of these bullets. As I get through them, I'll make that one. But in essence, accomplishments to date, working on the Western Avenue improvement, finishing some of the final pieces of the Reeser and the Central Beaverton, or the Beaverton Central Garage. Working on continued implementation of downtown equity strategy, working on a pilot program for reestablishment assistance for this is the last of the tenants we've been helping, and so that program is sunsetting for the moment. We're working on parking downtown, as well as on-street parking, as well as in the Beaverton Central Garage. Doing some business improvement, and the number should be 21. Sorry, my finger on 25, but 21 building improvement grants and 3 pre-development grants to date. Both of those programs are established to try to encourage the overall best and highest and best use, I guess you would say, of building stock and the redevelopment area. So looking at ways we can turn over and improve the through insertion of funding from Bureau into the building stock and help owners. The dining commons is one of the items that we've worked on in the last year or two, and continue with the guidance of council to work on what the next steps for the dining commons will look like. We've got funds set aside in this next budget as well. If I can get the next slide. So we've also done, and not just the sort of immediate of working on projects, but we've looked at some long-term planning as well, and completed 3 significant long-term plans. The portfolio redevelopment strategy is one that's come through URAC and BURA and was adopted. This is really thinking about how we should and could redevelop properties that we own, that we've acquired around Central Beaverton, and looking at when sort of the timing, but also the highest and best use based on recommendations from the consultant. So we'll continue to implement that plan going forward. And I think, excuse me, we'll try to move forward with some RFPs to construct and redevelop those parcels as we move forward. One of them will come forward, we think, in this next year. The Downtown Parks and Open Space Framework Plan, that's an effort with THPRD that was recently completed, and we're going to look forward to starting to implement that plan. And then finally, really significant, the Bureau 5-year action plan update, and that is sort of the underpinning of a lot of the budget, as well as a lot of the activity of staff going forward for the next year or 5. So we're excited to have that completed, and it gives us a framework to work off of and move items forward. Next slide, please. So mentioned the redevelopment, the portfolio redevelopment strategy. Lombard West site is the first recommended site, and first that we're hoping to move forward and release into the development world. We've received, it's a 2-acre site near the transit center. We were awarded and received funding. We're starting into the pre-development on Metro grant that we received. So we're excited to have that additional funding as well. We're hoping that it will be, as it says, high density housing, and essentially looking at the due diligence right now and starting through our initial community engagement. So more to come for sure on that. We will bring that forward to the Bureau board, and we'll have more steps as we go forward. But in essence, trying to get that project as it was recommended to be the first to get that going. Next slide. So the two programs I briefly mentioned, Building Improvement Grant Program and the Pre-Development Grant Program. We've had 17 awarded so far. I said 21. We've got several in the pipeline. And so we should, by the end of the year, expect to have the 21 complete. And really the benefit of that is the program offers design services and matching grants to help businesses and property owners with the sort of the outward appearance as well as the operation of their buildings. And so we're seeing some interest in that, obviously, and we're able to really reinvest into the quality of the building, the built infrastructure in the downtown area. The pre-development grant program is really conceptual design and cash matching. And so we're seeing some use so far, 3 awarded as of this time. And we've had interest from a number of other folks as well, but really looking at ways that we can enhance both the housing stock, the building stock, and try to really get underutilized properties to their highest and best use. So we're optimistic about that program as well. Next slide. So other ongoing things that we have going on, we have been, as I mentioned at the beginning, working on downtown equity strategy implementation. We had the staff lead for that unfortunately depart from the city, and so we just rehired that position very recently. So I'm hopeful that we'll see an uptick in action on that, but we have been working on construction displacement assistance as one of the actions that was prioritized, and so looking to pick that work back up and match that with the individual we were able to hire. But in other programs we've got going on, the parking compliance program is one that's come through Bureau recently. We will bring it forward to council as well, and we'll have an update. We talked about the dining commons. We've got funds set aside for ongoing work there for design. We've got funds set aside for operations as was directed by the council. We're also looking at completing the leasing for the central garage and trying to get all of the spaces occupied. Work is ongoing on that. We've had some success and some interest, but we're working through tenant improvements and trying to identify the right tenants in those spaces. And I think in general, just trying to make sure that we continue to maintain the properties that we own, and so that continues to be an ongoing effort of staff. Next slide, please. So other things that are upcoming, you may have heard about the downtown loop. Bureau is definitely invested in that, thinking about how it fits into the infrastructure and transportation portfolio, that bucket that we're talking about. That's certainly both the largest allocation, and it is going to be a significant investment project for redevelopment dollars. We're also looking at supporting other projects, including the Milliken Way extension, the year-round shelter. We're seeing investments from other projects in the area that are benefiting the entire downtown. And looking to move forward the Canyon Road pedestrian enhancements. So next slide. So we're also seeing private investment and investment that is not really tied to Bureau in the sense of dollars, and yet is still benefiting the area. So this is the idea that we're hoping to see. This is floating all boats by investing by really looking at ways to enhance the environment and encourage private investment. So Madera Raleigh Hills, Madera Beaverton are both under construction and planned to be opened shortly, we hope. The Raleigh Hills location on Western will include 270 studio 1 and 2 bedroom units. Madera Beaverton on Broadway will include 312 units. And those are going from studio all the way to 3 bedroom, as well as that space will have ground floor retail and structured parking adjacent to it. Next slide. So there is additional or has been additional investment in the area, private investment. We're leveraging the redevelopment dollars, and we're seeing investments in Cedar Hills, in the Acme construction. They are rehab the building and are re-tenanting. Next slide. We've also seen private investment in the organic milk exchange. And you can see the before and after there. And I believe that that property is available for lease. Next slide, please. So just a few, just touch on a few things from the 5-year action plan which will be a huge priority going forward for staff, trying to put that plan into motion. That was approved recently. We're essentially looking at ways we can look for additional funds from federal or other federal or state partners for ways we can do more with the properties, or I'm sorry, with the projects. We're also looking at, and I think we can probably skip to the next slide here, but working on the 3 5-year strategic goals, which placemaking and community identity support was one of them. So this idea of really working on the Arts and Innovation District concept planning is going to be a key step that staff will undertake on the placemaking and identity. Obviously thinking about capital and infrastructure, the loop, some of the downtown parking and the parking garage, the dining commons. We've got stormwater and creek enhancements we're looking to try to leverage with our partners. Additionally, we've got the downtown parks and open space plan to start to implement, and we're working already with THPRD on that. And you'll see, again, the loop and other things come forward shortly, given the funding timelines that we've got going on. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up my portion of this and hand it off to Debbie, you'll continue to see a lot of investment being made in trying to improve the building stock and trying to encourage housing in the area, looking at ways to create or modify existing programs like the incentive programs that we've had in place in the past, looking for ways to take feedback that we received so far and consider whether grants should be loans, and how we consider program income will be something we'll work on. But you'll continue to see ongoing investment in the downtown in this next year through this budget and through the activities of staff. So you'll see the grant programs continue. A lot of these solicitations starting based on that redevelopment strategy plan. And we're optimistic for the future. I think we'll see some really exciting times over the next few years as the 5-year action plan is implemented. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to the Bureau Treasurer.
Good evening, Bureau Board, Budget Committee members. I am not Tyler Ryerson. I am Debbie Lochner, the treasurer, but Zoom decided that it did not want to behave. So if you forward 2 slides, we'll get started on the numbers. So overall, for our budget this year, our revenues are $12.1 million and our expenditures are $24.1 million. Our beginning working capital is about $12 million. This slide really does show you how those are broken out. As you can see, the bulk of our revenue, $7.4 million nearly, is coming from our tax increment. Tax increment revenue can only be spent to pay debt. You can see that our debt service is almost $6.8 million. So that's those are directly correlated. If you go to the next slide. So we'll talk about each fund separately. As I said, the tax increment fund is the funds that are used to pay for debt service. So tax increment is the growth of the property taxes based on the year that Bureau became a agency. And when the property tax was frozen at that time, and all growth becomes tax increment. And so that's what goes into this fund. This tax increment is growing because you are developing in the Bureau area. So every time you build something, that tax increment goes up because the property taxes actually go up. So if you go to the next slide. Our capital projects fund. So you can see that in our capital projects fund, this is money that we transfer in money to cover property acquisitions and construction. This particular fund for this year, we've have previous acquisitions that have informed our portfolio strategy. And this would include design work on the loop and other transportation projects. As you'll see, a theme throughout all these funds is we have matched the budget to the 5-year plan that the Bureau Board just recently adopted. So some of the changes in the budget are related to the adoption of that 5-year plan. If you go to the next slide. In the Program and Activities Fund, this is where our property management goes for the properties that we have acquired. This also includes spending for our business improvement grants and the downtown equity strategies, starting to implement some of that. This also has some funding in it to support the First Street Dining Commons. If you go to the next slide. So our debt service funds, again, this is the money gets transferred in from the tax increment fund to pay debt service. This fund is just for debt service. So we issued bonds in 2020. We have $2.6 million of those bond funds remaining unspent at June 30th, or expected to be remaining unspent at the end of this fiscal year or the coming fiscal year. So there is funding in contingency. If we do find projects that we can spend that money on, we can certainly do a mid-year supplemental to add some additional funding. The best practice is for bonds to be substantially spent within 3 years of issuance and completely spent within 5 years. The bonds we issued were taxable, so the IRS really doesn't have the same prohibitions on taxable bonds that they do on tax-exempt bonds. So it's less concerning to spend that money in the 5-year period. And we are paying interest on those bond funds. If you go to the next slide. This just to wrap up my portion. This is our parking facilities fund. As you can see, we are transferring money in from the program activities fund to help cover the cost of the parking fund. So this includes our parking garage operations and management, and also includes our on-street parking compliance program. And that was really the kind of, you can see this has kind of gone down over the year, but we're still, it is not covering its costs. So that's really the end of the financial pieces, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. You can go to the next slide. That's it.
Okay, well, thank you
And
both.
Tyler is here, so if you have questions, he can answer them.
So before we get to questions, I think we need to do the public hearing portion. So I want to open the hearing to the public. Anybody wishing to speak at the hearing should follow the instructions included on tonight's agenda. If you've joined the meeting by phone, please enter *9 to let the city recorder know you wish to speak. Alternatively, if you joined online, let the city recorder know you wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand feature. After each person speaks, council members may ask questions of the speaker. City recorder, is there anybody who wishes to comment from the public?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right. In that case, the public hearing portion is closed. And before we begin deliberations on the proposed budget, we need a motion to approve the proposed budget as submitted. Is there a motion?
I can make the motion to approve the budget as submitted.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Hassan, seconded by Member Duggar. Is there any discussion on the motion? And this is also be a good time to ask questions of the staff if you have them. Just as a reminder, if you have questions, please put your name in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you. And looks like Chair Hartmeyer Prigg has a question.
Thank you. Debbie, what you were talking about what fund is this? The materials and services, I think. And then we have, sorry, I have a hard time matching the narrative page to the breakdown. But on page 17, we have one line item that says begin First Street Commons design considerations. And Debbie, you mentioned that there was some support for First Street Dining Commons. Is the amount only tied to design this year?
I'm not sure. Maybe Susan, you can answer that. There's so many numbers in my head right now that I can't recall if there's operating money in there. I know that the design is in there.
Yes, good evening. This is Susan Cole. I'm the Assistant Finance Director. Debbie, you're correct. There's both amounts included in the fiscal 25 proposed budget. There's money for operating on a seasonal temporary basis. And then we do have what I would call a placeholder for initial design at the point if we get there this fiscal year.
Okay, and so for the temporary seasonal, is that being paid for from program increment?
That would be correct. Program income. Yep.
Program income. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you. That was my only question.
Looks like Kia has a question.
Yes, thank you. I'm going through my the notes from last year, just to things to check in with the staff about. One of my questions for you is whether or not we were able to develop and get adopted a Bureau board adopted policy around program income.
So the answer for that is no, we have not yet, but that is something that we are working with the city attorney on and will be bringing forward for the board consideration later this year.
Later this fiscal year?
Not this fiscal year, because this fiscal year is only got
that's pretty
left. I meant this calendar year. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you.
I would just say we've got that on the work plan already for by the end of the calendar year. That's our plan.
Any other questions or discussion about the budget? Councilor Hassan.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a labor of love. I feel like Bureau 4 years, it feels super big and super important. And I've got my little 5-year action plan and I'm living my best life. This isn't a question, it's just more a comment. I heard your kind of comment on contingency. I don't think this is a conversation for this moment now, but just for like our council, maybe to start thinking about some ideas on, if there is some extra, are there some, the downtown equity strategy programs that we could potentially fund? So wanted to kind of flag that comment for this group just to hear. So thank you, Bureau staff. Y'all have been just MVPs. Really appreciate it.
Chair Hartmeyer-Prig.
Yeah, I have one more question to follow up to the PDF of questions and answers. So when we have bond proceeds that are unspent, what does that mean? Like, are we just accruing, like, can we accrue interest against that to help pay back the debt? Or, like, what is the consequence of having that money sitting in an account unspent?
So yes, you do pay interest on it, but we also have our idle funds invested, so we're earning some interest on them as well. The IRS, well, with the taxable bond, they don't really care if you make money on it, but you really, that's not the purpose of a bond. It's not to put it in the bank and make money, it's to put it in the bank, build something and make money that way. So yes, we are paying interest. We are earning less interest than what we are paying. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps. I guess maybe Tyler, can you help me understand then, like, do we have, like, within this budget, are we planning on paying or using that money, right? Like, since we're now another year later and I don't know if it's the same funds or, how that works, but is that 2.6 million accounted for in the spending for this year?
I believe it's not all accounted for, but again, we're trying to get that spent, and bond money would be the identified source for a lot of things to be spent first. So if we did have a project come forward that was bond eligible, we would use the bond money first.
Okay. And property acquisition is part of the eligible funding, is that true?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Beatty.
Yeah, I just need a clarification on something. I was late to get my question in, but asked the city manager this morning about the affordable housing expense line of $450 in Fund 903 that includes funds that are administrated through community action for home repair. And I want to know how we came to that number, and also thinking about Bureau's boundaries. There's very few housing, like standalone housing in here, and it's a lot of apartments and a lot of other things. So how did we come to this number, and how are we going to and is this really the best and highest use of Bureau funds?
Yeah, actually, I'll take that question there. It's a really good program for manufactured homes. And we do have 2 mobile home parks within the boundaries of Bureau. And so we've actually already started doing that for this fiscal year. We had set aside money for this fiscal year, and we're adding that same amount of $125,000 for next year. And so that home repair fund is something that was recognized in the downtown equity strategy as well. And so it's one of the strategies that we're implementing. The 450,000 is that 125, and then an additional for other affordable housing types of uses.
How many mobile homes exist within the Bureau boundary?
I would be guessing. So it's probably 100 to 125. Pioneer Village over off of Milliken, just south of Milliken Station area, and then on 117th north of Light Rail line.
So we're setting aside about $200 or $2,500 per mobile home for repairs.
Oh, 125, yeah.
So how did we decide that this money should be used in mobile home parks and not in housing? This feels like a policy decision to me.
It's for the manufactured homes themselves, not the parks, if that's clarification.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. I do think this is a policy question when we spend this amount of money in something like this. And so like, was there policymakers involved in this decision or was this a staff decision?
Yeah, it's a strategy in the downtown equity strategy that was approved by Bureau Board.
Okay.
And I just want to be clear, I think we were saying it was 450,000, but I think the program we're talking about is 125,000. It's only a
So
portion.
where's the rest of them? Tell me more about the rest, because he said 250, well, he said 125, then he said 125 again, which is 250, then he said 400,000, that would be 650,000. So help
I
me
think
understand your numbers because you're telling them to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I don't think we're
Well-
adding. I think we're describing, but I think the 125 is the manufactured home program. And then there was 300 or so in the budget put there for implementation of the 5-year action plan. And so I think that was more of an aspirational number. I'm not sure that we actually have a program that we're sure we're going to hit this year, but I think we were making sure that we had funds available that were allocated.
I'm not trying to like dive down in the details, but help me understand. The line item says affordable housing. You're saying implementation of a 5-year plan. That is two different things. What are we talking about here?
Well, I think there are a number of strategies in the 5-year action plan, right? So it's the
You
ability
think
to
it's going to be $300,000 to implement your 500? Is that what you're
It's
telling me? That
manufactured.
amount of money to implement a 5-year plan?
It's for the first year of the 5-year plan. And so, it's just for this year and it's just for that category. So we put aside funding for the category to be able to have funds available to implement. And so I'm not clear, and maybe Tyler, if you've got a more
Yeah.
specific use of the money, but there were 2 separate programs.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so in the 5-year action plan, you'll see a balloon of, I think it was $8 million or so. And that would be for a very specific project, leading up to specific projects. There's due diligence that is necessary for affordable housing to ensure that they can do the project. And that's the $300,000 for this fiscal year of that 450 that is in the budget.
I think that you guys need to send a white sheet. I'm not going to hold it up today, but we have housing staff that are experts in this in other parts of the city. So like the numbers, and maybe you're going off the hip here, and I think I want to give you a chance to be more intentional about what you're saying to us. And so I'm not going to hold it up today, but my expectation is that you follow up with a more detailed memo, because $300,000 to implement something that's already in the process, I need better understanding about that. So I'm going to pass it tonight. And my hope is that you don't start spending down until we can have another look at this line item.
Well, and I just want to add, thank you for that. This budget actually reflects the 5-year plan, and the 5-year plan didn't have every project identified. So there are some placeholders in this budget to match what was in the 5-year plan. So yes, staff will need to come back and tell you what they intend to do with those additional funds that were included in that 5-year plan that may not have been identified as specific projects.
Okay, any other questions or any other discussion of the motion? Director Kim.
Yes, just probably a clarification. And I think this is something that has been discussed before, but the parking agreement we have with the parking management company not only has the garage, but also the streets, the management of the parking system in the streets. Is it okay for Bureau to be paying for part that's not over and above the parking structure?
So I think I might defer to an attorney for it's okay language, but I think that's been the way that we've budgeted for this last couple of years, and it's because of the boundary and
Yeah, I think that what happens is transportation is the key here, and it's transportation related as long as the enforcement is occurring within the boundaries of the district. That would be the key. Tyler, do you know of anything else that is historically that I've forgotten to mention?
Not really, Bill. I think the key is that there has been decisions along the way that the operations management of the parking garage and also the parking compliance, the pilot parking compliance, which is in its 9th month, is urban renewal based program. And we've gone to the 2-year pilot is what we've been honing in on to be able to understand what the parking compliance would do for moving of vehicles in the downtown, which would help benefit all the businesses and residents who are down in the area, which most downtown parking programs, that's exactly what they're intended to do, is to ensure that there is movement of vehicles in the on-street parking.
I think that nexus between enforcement of the street parking puts people into the garage is important to understand too, in terms of getting people to use the parking garage and not to essentially occupy the street for unlimited amounts of time. Does that answer the question, or Budget Committee Member Kim?
Thank you. No, I just want to make sure that if the parking enforcement occurs on the city street that is outside the boundary, that it is okay for Bureau to be paying for that.
No, it wouldn't be okay outside the boundaries of the district for Bureau to be spending money there, but I don't think they are doing enforcement outside of the urban renewal district.
No, that is correct. It is only within a very specific area within the urban renewal district, and which includes a few streets in Old Town and a little bit of area in the central Beaverton area.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Councilor Kimmy?
Yes, thank you. I'll just follow up about the parking. Who oversees the implementation of parking? Reason that I'm asking is, I'm right there since about a month, maybe a month ago, month and a half ago. I haven't seen parking enforcement that much, but first of all, I don't see them that much. Number two, I don't see them enforcing as much. So a lot of cars are overstaying their 2-hour limit. So I'm not nitpicking, but how's the feedback and how does it work? Who oversees it?
Yeah, so we have the SP Plus, who is our contractors who are doing both the garage and the on-street parking compliance program. And that contract is managed by our parking team, in which if there's anything that comes up, then we're part of those conversations, meet with them monthly, have conversations daily, and to ensure that the program is working smoothly. And I think some of the challenges we will see in the next 2 years, in particular around your office, Councilor Kimmy, is Beaverton High School and its reconstruction that's going to be happening. We've been working with the school district in order to try to mitigate, come up with a plan, that their contractors, the materials and laydown area, staff of the school and students are adequately taken care of during that reconstruction process, because we've recognized that it could be an impact, and we have been in good conversations with the school district since day one. And we hope for the best. And if there is any thing that comes up from our community, then we have a parking line, then we can address it as those issues may arise.
I would just add that we are also committed to coming back to Bureau with and council both with further discussions on parking.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. Sorry. Regards to the program fund and its uses, I'd love to see the policy discussion as soon as possible. And the question is, I know that you have a plan to use the money to fund the seasonal use of the dining commons. So the question is, are we gonna keep fund the dining commons until we have a policy discussion in regards to it? Is that ongoing process? Because I remember vaguely from last year's communication that we were supposed to have this policy discussion happen prior to this budget cycle. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'd love to have that discussion before soon, so that that everybody's on the same page. So what is the policy regards to funding it for the Bureau?
So I think right now, from the Bureau perspective, we were given the direction to fund the ongoing, year as is, with the also the expectation that we continue to research the impact, what options are available for the future, and to think about options around design and those kinds of things, so that there was more breadth around that conversation for the future. So this, in a lot of ways, is a bit of a placeholder until we're able to gather more information from the community, rather, gather options around design as well. But we did want to put in money for the immediate operations, and then for the potential, the idea of kicking off that design work. And then in the 5-year action plan, there's also the assumption, which is an assumption, but we were building a 5-year action plan. We didn't want to not have it in there, that we would continue to do design and construction. And so that is placeholder, because that is a framework. It's not required to be spent as it's written in the plan. But again, we didn't want to ignore the comments based on the feedback we'd received.
Yes, thank you. Because it's been a year since we had the discussion, I'd love to have the conversation soon, so that it's not just ongoing. But that's all my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I would ask something to Councilor Kimmy's point. My recollection from our discussion last year was, yes, this is going to be a temporary thing. Yes, we're going to be talking about this in the future, but is there a specific timeline, or at this stage, is that funding going to be rolled into Bureau's budget indefinitely until a different decision is made?
I think we're hoping to have that conversation before the next budget year, so that it would not be indefinite, and to have a firmer plan before this time next year. I think just given the feedback we'd received from council and from Bureau, we didn't feel it was wise to not fund it, but certainly happy to try to bring that conversation forward and decide the future of the commons. But I think it's a little bit tied into our ability to prioritize various projects that we have going on in Bureau. I will just caveat that as well, just given staff resources and all of those things.
And we also need to identify a funding source. We don't have an alternative funding source for the dining commons at this point in time.
Thank you. Any additional questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we are ready to vote on the motion. Just a reminder, that motion is to approve the proposed Bureau budget for fiscal year 2024-25 as submitted. City Recorder, can you please take the roll?
Webb,
Yes.
Satsmary,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Kimmy,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Duggar,
Yes.
Sundberg,
Yes.
Teeter,
Yes.
Beatty,
Yes.
Bawa,
Yes.
Hughes,
Yes.
Hassan,
Yes.
Bernal,
Yes.
Kaihan,
Yes.
Reister,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Hartmeyer Brigg.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so the proposed Bureau budget as approved will be forwarded to the Bureau Board for a public hearing on June 4th of this year. And we've now completed tonight's agenda, so we can adjourn.